Hello, and welcome to Elevate Leadership Podcast, powered by South Carolina State University's 1890 Research and Extension. I am Elizabeth Mosley Hawkins, Director of Marketing and Communications for the 1890 program, which provides public service activities and programs to South Carolinians, as well as conducts problem-solving research to impact the quality of life for South Carolinians. Through our very important work at SC State 1890, we innovate and educate to elevate the quality of life and the standard of living for all South Carolinians. Now, Elevate Leadership Podcast is intended to advance communities through entrepreneurship and leadership development. And we do this by having conversations with leaders and entrepreneurs from across the state who talk to us about their career progression and how they were able to gain the positions that they have been able to throughout their career. Our podcast premieres each month on YouTube and is now available on all streaming platforms. So you can listen to us while you're on the go. Of course, you can always learn more about SC State University and the 1890 Research and Extension Program on the university's website, which is scsu.edu, and you can follow us on all of our socials at SC State 1890. Now, this week, 1890 celebrates National Ag Week, and we are truly excited to celebrate this month because on March 26th, SC State 1890 Research and Extension will hold its ribbon cutting and groundbreaking ceremony for its newly acquired research and demonstration farm in Oler, South Carolina, and we are just ecstatic about that. But more important, today we have a special guest with us. And that special guest is none other than South Carolina Department of Agriculture Commissioner Hugh Weathers. Hugh Weathers oversees the state's largest economic industry, which of course is agriculture. And within that industry, there are about 250,000 jobs, and it accounts for nearly $46 billion in economic development. Under his leadership, the Department of Ag has a successful branding campaign, certified SC Grown. And if you've gone to restaurants and farmers markets and grocery stores throughout the state, you've seen that badge. And basically, it is a way for South Carolina consumers to be able to identify and support locally grown and locally sourced produce, of course, grown by farmers right here in the state. Hugh Weathers is also leading, or has led, the development of the Agribusiness Center for Research and Entrepreneurship, which through innovation and discovery seeks to further expand the state's prosperity through furthering South Carolina agribusiness throughout the state. So Commissioner Weathers is a fourth generation farmer who lives not too far from SC State, right in Bowman, South Carolina. And he earned degrees in finance and accounting from the University of South Carolina. So, guys, join us in welcoming Commissioner Weathers. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, listen, Commissioner Weathers, I mentioned that we'll be celebrating Ag Week this week. Can you talk to me a little bit about the significance of agriculture, not just in the state, but of course across the U.S.?
Well, you look at it in several respects. You mentioned the economic side of things, that agribusiness, meaning everything that we grow and process and distribute and finally consume, is South Carolina's largest economic engine. And that's ag and forestry and everything. And that's the same in other states as well, that many of our states. So the economic side needs to be talked about, that it is our economy that provides for all of us by generating revenues that we in turn invest in ways to improve the places where we live, no matter if it's South Carolina or Iowa. So we look at the economic side of it. But beyond, and that's an industry. Beyond that, in South Carolina, it's nearly 25,000 farmers of every demographic you can think of, age, race, male, female, and it's the people. So I think in National Farming Week, it's a special time to just emphasize the people behind agriculture. And the farmers are the base of it. Now, as you said, South Carolina, the agribusiness industry is nearly 246,000 jobs, but there are only 25,000 farmers. It just speaks to the partnership between me as a farmer and somebody along the food processing distribution industry chain that impacts the value of what we grow until the time we consume it. So it's not just economics, it's people. And lately we're talking about it's a real positive for the environment. You know, we're going to be talking a lot over the next few years about the climate and how we can do our part to help mitigate some trends that are happening. So agriculture is one of our bright stars in how we can impact the climate going forward. So there are many aspects about farming besides someone just saying, yeah, my great uncle was a farmer and I remember going out, because I hear all those stories. So you have all of these aspects that it's really important to just slow down for a minute and remind, as I call our neighbors across the fence. You know, farmers make up less than 2% of the population. And it's 2% of us on one side of the fence, and it's 98% on the other side. So we got to stop and communicate just how important this partnership for farmers and consumers and the environment and all of these things, how important that partnership is.
I love that you said that it's really about the people, because, you know, of course, with 1890 Research and Extension, that is what we do. We look at ways in which we can help individuals, families, youth, and community in partnership with the SDA.
Yep.
So I want to go back a few years.
Oh. Well, I have a lot of them to go back.
You are a fourth generation dairy farmer?
Well, we were in the dairy farm business for 87 years.
Oh,
but
man.
My great-grandfather farmed cotton and lived right near where I live on the farm.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, back to the mid-1800s.
So how, growing up in farming, how did that motivate you into this chosen career path?
Well, it teaches you the value of hard work. It teaches you discipline. Lets you know that a job is not done until it's done. I know that sounds pretty simple, but it teaches you that you work with forces beyond your control. In that case, it's always been weather.
Right.
Nowadays, maybe it's more politics or something like that, forces beyond my control. But I believe that everything, starting from working on the farm as a young person, mixing it in with playing sports, again, taught me a discipline of time, the amount of time I had. But looking back, I think that everything I've done has added just one layer of preparation for the next thing that I would do.
Love that. You do often hear people say that if you look over your life, you'll see little threads that kind of all blending together to get you to, you know, your purpose or even your professional pathway. So speaking of your professional pathway, you know, being a farmer, what other paths did you take in order to ascend to commissioner of ag?
You know, my degrees were in business, in accounting, and in finance. So I worked for a couple of years in corporate banking. And in that, I learned more about the application of business, not just learning it, but the application of business. And then a few years later, I went home to our family farm to manage the business of farming. It is quite a critical part of maintaining a farm. I always put farming on three. You know, a dairy farmer is going to use a three-legged stool, like a milking stool, but agronomic. If you can't grow a crop successfully and get a yield, you're not going to make it to the next
Right.
level. Business that we just talked about, managing your affairs, working with your bankers, working with your employees, working with regulators. So the business side. And finally, like we've done with Certified SE Grown, getting people to think about the marketing of what they are doing. It's great to grow it, but if you can't sell it and someone
Yeah.
doesn't buy it, that's just
It's
a
just
lot.
gonna sit there.
It's just going to sit there. So I went back to the farm and we got into the milk and delivery business, trucking business. So that was another business. We had several businesses related to dairy.
Okay.
And so that was a great learning experience. The dairy industry is a tough side of farming. I say tough as in a lot of hours required.
Okay.
The margins for profit opportunities are just not there as there are with some other opportunities in
Okay.
farming. So learned a lot of things. As I said, I believe everything has prepared me for the next thing.
So talk to us a little bit about, I think you've been Commissioner of Ag since 2004 or
I think
9?
last count, 106 years. 2004.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for some people who might not know what a commissioner...
Who weren't born then.
Yeah, who might not know what a commissioner of
There we
Ag
go.
does, tell us a little bit, or how do you define your role?
All right, so South Carolina in 1879 decided we need a Department of Agriculture. And it was and when it was formed, it did some regulatory things. It helped provide a fair playing ground, if you will, by measuring weights and measures. When farmers sold things, most everything was by how much it weighed. All right, so as people always ask, why do you do the gas pumps? Well, that was just a natural evolution from that. But the mission of the Department of Agriculture is to nurture and advance and create opportunities for the industry of agriculture and its participants, the farmers, and its benefactors, the consumers, to thrive based on having a successful industry. I'm sure our mission statement says it a little differently, but that's why we're there on that half of what the department does. And the other half is our regulatory responsibilities, again, for fair trade with agriculture, for safety, with the 7 laboratories that we operate, whether it's gasoline quality or food residues, or lately hemp qualities and seed, and these things that we do on behalf of the consumer really is a part of the interface of agriculture, the farmers and the consumers. You used the phrase earlier, we educate so we can elevate, I think. We've said we educate before we regulate, so that we can help a person achieve success and not just feel the weight of a burdensome regulation coming at it. So.
Well, we certainly know to some extent about hemp, as in, because we've had the opportunity to host some webinars.
Not long ago.
Yeah, and so I mean that is probably one of our most popular
Subjects to talk
webinars.
about, I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
and there's just so much interest.
Well, you
in
look
that crop.
at it as we've looked at other crops that come along, and we say, is this a viable crop to add to our mix in South Carolina? Does it grow well with our climate and our soil? Do we have marketing outlets that provide a profit to farmers? And there's a lot of unknowns in that particular crop still. So.
But the one thing that I do like about is as we attend the webinars and meet various persons in the industry, is just to see how everything is somewhat unfolding, and to see it how it's unfolding in all of these different avenues, processing, that kind of thing. So it's just interesting.
Still a lot to unfold.
Yes. So Commissioner Weathers, you do a lot, under the umbrella of commissioner. But what do you most enjoy about being in agriculture and in your role?
Well, I feel the responsibility of my office says to look ahead. All right, so we've looked at the economic analysis that says here's where agriculture is. Now, the reason we're monitoring or examining closely is because a little over 10 years ago, when agriculture had an economic impact of $34 billion based on the analysis, I can recall sitting in my office one day and said, okay, it's 2009, we're just about to get into a decade, starting 2010. My thinking was, can we grow the agribusiness industry to $50 billion by the year 2020? I said, we got a decade to do it. That's a pretty aggressive goal if you do the math on the annual economic growth required to do it. We came, and our last numbers are 2018, so I guess the report card may be still out, but we were at $46.2 billion. But my point is, we took something that we called 50 by 20, 50 billion by the year 2020, and it sort of set out a marching plan for us, a goal, something to focus on. Now that we're into 2021, we're sort of looking at the next 10 years.
Yeah.
We don't have a slogan.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we're looking at it, and in doing that, we do a lot of research to find out what farmers are thinking, what our consumers are thinking, what a post-COVID world will look like for our farmers. What opportunities will be there that we haven't thought about? So you asked what I enjoy. I enjoy two things. I enjoy the management of the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
It's just like a business. Put great talent in the right places, give them their responsibilities, and as much as possible just ease out of the way and work with them and don't overmanage. The other side is leading, providing leadership to say in 10 years, what will our industry look like? How do we get that next generation of farmers, whether they're young people or people moving to South Carolina or older folks wanting to dabble part-time, even that's a part of our industry. Part of that makes up our farmers.
Right.
So how do we create opportunities for us to thrive or to be successful 5-10 years from now?
And talking about thriving, in what ways are you doing that to make sure that the industry continues to grow, especially with competing industries in the state?
The first thing that I do is I recognize that all of these things that we might propose for a farmer to have an option, diversification, hemp, or flax, or other crops. If a farmer is used to growing corn and soybeans and cotton, our staples, what about vegetables? Are you willing to diversify some? Point is, we can lay all of these things out. We try to mitigate the unknowns as much as possible. But then it's key to recognize we do all these things. It's that farmer's decision, his or her decision, to risk their capital, their credit, their reputation, their future, whatever on that decision. And I think it's important for me, for my staff, whoever is advocating for these things, to recognize it's that person's decision. We need to help them, but it's not something to take lightly.
I love that you talk about diversification, because earlier you talked about when you came to take over manage your family farm. I think that's one of the things that you did, is you diversified the dairy farm by doing transportation, some of the other things that you talked about. One thing that kind of sticks out in my mind as you were talking is that you all rely on data. And everybody talks about data. So how do you use big data to be successful?
Well, now, big data kind of implies, on farm and yield. We use a lot of research data. I'll give you an example. You talked about certified SC grown. It is an investment of our dollars, our state tax dollars, to manage that program.
Okay.
So is it successful? We said, well, of course it is. Well, a couple of measurements. The last time we measured, over 80% of the people, when slightly prompted, said, yeah, I know exactly what that is. The certified SE grown label. And I can't believe I didn't wear a lapel pin with one on. But anyway, they recognize just what you said. You choose that, you're keeping your dollars here. So, well, that's nice. All right, so then we said, well, let's find out how successful it's been. So I think we had University of South Carolina do an analysis that said of the farm products that are impacted by the certified SE grown label.
Okay.
In other words, cotton and soybeans and corn are not impacted by that. That's impacted by world trade.
Yes.
All right. But fruits and vegetables, meats, milk, things that we produce here. In 2018, South Carolinians, compared to 2010, bought $176 million more worth of South Carolina products.
Wow.
Now,
That's
there's
successful.
a lot of reasons, but we take our share of the credit for them recognizing, just like people recognize SC stating what it means. They recognize what certified SC grown means. They act on it, and it's made a difference.
Well, I certainly know. I can tell you. You can use me.
There you go.
When I go grocery shopping, that's one of the first things that I look for. I want to make sure that I am getting something locally, especially like the peaches and strawberries and stuff like that. So I can attest to that. I want to talk to you about how you manage or handle constructive criticism. Pretty sure.
My wife would tell me not well.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm as a leader, and anybody who's thinking about going to be a leader, or if they're currently a leader, I'm pretty sure that you have encountered people who have opposing views.
No.
How do you handle that? But then how do you use that to grow?
I'll give you one little nugget. It just so happens last week in a Bible study, we were studying Ecclesiastes.
Okay.
And that's old Solomon trying to figure out how to live his life, how to get wisdom, and how to enjoy it or whatever. In the 7th chapter, there's a verse that says, this is Hugh's version of what it says, don't pay attention to what everyone says. Because you may even hear your closest friend cursing you or talking about it. Because then it goes on to say, because remember, sometimes you talk about them in a moment. My point is, someone told me years ago, part of leadership is knowing what to ignore. They must have read Ecclesiastes. Anyway, and then that's not primarily the thing to do, to ignore, because I am a public servant.
Yeah.
It's impacted by the messenger as well as the message. If it's just someone wanting to come, we get involved at the department. And we look at it, we try to examine just how heartfelt is what they're saying. And then based on that is someone how we take it. But then it comes to me personally, social media,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. All these things that you can be criticized. And a lot of times I say, well, how much do they know about what we're doing? Yeah. And if it's just a slight bit of information they used and made a conclusion, well, I'm guilty of that sometimes, not knowing enough to weigh things out before I interject an opinion. And if that happens coming toward us, we kind of take it in that light, that person not as well informed. But then when those do happen, that somebody that I trust, family member, a friend, a business, their farmers in this state have so much wisdom that I just soak it up every time I can. When they bring things that say, I think you missed this one, then I listen very closely. And from the office to my house is about 50 minutes of driving.
Lots of time to think,
A lot of time to replay conversations and whatnot. So here a couple of things. You can't have a thin skin in doing what I do. Number two, my something I live by. It has changed what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It has not changed who I am. My parents instilled some pretty good values in me, to value other people's opinion. The Bible says, think of others more highly than yourself.
Yes.
I don't know if I do that all the time, but it's just, again, thick enough skin, knowing, looking at the bigger picture that you are a public servant. And I have 5 million bosses, 5.25 million South Carolinians
Oh my goodness.
as bosses. So we try to keep it in balance.
Yeah. Over the past year, Commissioner Weathers, the world, just was overtaken devastated by COVID-19. And, South Carolina is no different. And I do know that a lot of the farmers were devastated by COVID-19, wreaked havoc on profits. What were some of the initiatives and programs that the SCDA put into place to help alleviate some of that?
I'm glad you asked, because we did several things. One, immediately, with the restaurants were closing and the schools were closing, our farmers who had products that they normally sell to restaurants or normally sell to schools, we put up an extra page on our website that says, here are all across South Carolina places that might not normally sell direct to the public, but now they are. And here's the names, here's the numbers, here's where they are. And that list just kept growing. We might have started with 30, we ended up with 80 or 90 places. And our people that we listed said it was a tremendous help to do that. Let me tell you something else we did. The federal government did a Farmers to Families program.
Yes.
All right, that was the first few awards, rounds of that money. I don't think it helped South Carolina enough. So we went out and raised privately on me getting on the telephone, and we raised nearly $500,000, and we did the Farmers to Food Banks program. And we bought product from nearly 30 farms across the state, working with 8 or 9 food banks around the state. Right here in Orangeburg, I forget the name of it. It's Ace Basin. Ace Basin Food Co-op was based here, or they did the work here. Anyway, did work with them. Delivered 330 to 40,000 pounds of food. So we just took what the federal government was doing and said, you're not doing enough for South Carolina. And we went out and twisted some arms and raised nearly $500,000 to do it here.
I really love the concept of that program, because you already have so many families pre-COVID who were suffering from food insecurity issues, and then COVID just exacerbated it. And then you just see the news reports of families without food, and so I just want to commend the Department of Ag for seeing that need and leveraging the resources that you have, and like you said earlier, reaching out to the people. I just want to commend you all for doing that.
And it's one where that's not in our mission statement of the department, but I have a staff of a lot of young people that I say they get it. They understand when it's time to step up to that next level. It doesn't matter if it's in your job description. Just do it. Sound like Nike, I guess. Just do it. Just get it done.
You talk about young people. There still remains this perception of farming, antiquated, Farmer Brown kind of thing. And even here at SC State, as we try to educate students and encourage them to pursue careers in ag,
A few years back, one of our promotion programs, we called it Roots.
Okay.
The roots of my food And we used it, we have social media out there that's asking a lot of good questions, but maybe asking about how do we farm? How does agriculture produce the food that I feed my family?
Yes.
So we used the Roots campaign to say the roots of my passion for agriculture run deep. And we used a lot of young people in those videos that we did for them to tell their story.
Okay.
Whether they were first generation, third generation farmer, whatever. Didn't use any old guys like me because we wanted to send that message that if you are young and you think you have a passion for this, there are those in this industry who are just like you. Now, they've already taken these risks that we talked about, and they're producing, big, small, whatever. So that is how we try to tell the public, or tell our next generation of farmers, because you're exactly right. It's not just an image of old Farmer Brown. Again, the statistics tell us that the average age farmer is about 60. But more telling than that, I think we have 3 times as many farmers over the age of 70 than we do under the age of 45.
Wow.
So an average, it's just an average. So then you break it down.
Yeah.
So we've got to work to find those. I mean, that's why I have good conversations with Dr. Whitesides about what are we doing. And I had those same conversations with Clemson. And then we use another thing that you mentioned earlier. We call it ACRE, A-C-R-E, the Agribusiness Center for Research and Entrepreneurship. I can barely pronounce entrepreneurship. I know I can't spell it. Not sure what it is, but we're supporting it. And I say it lightly to say we're looking for those mostly young, bright minds with some idea that's cutting edge, maybe on the cusp of becoming a great thing for agriculture. And they're here, and we want to encourage them to take it to the next step. And we do a review of their proposal. We get 35 to 40 of them a year, and we pick 7 or 8. And we might give them $5,000. And in the advanced phase, they might get $25,000 to take it to the next level. So we're trying to find those young people, a lot smarter than me, to be a part of this industry.
I love that. So, I mean, just staying in that same vein, what do you think are some key factors in developing young leaders?
Obviously, the ones that everyone will tell you, get involved at the ground level. Pay your dues by some of the less glamorous sides of public service. Going back to me, as I said, I believe everything has prepared me for the next thing that I do. I got involved with the Farm Bureau as a young person. It's where I met my wife. How about that?
Oh, nice.
So get involved, learn from people who've been down those roads, whether it's a mentoring program, but the millennials or whichever generation we're talking now, is it X, Y, Z? I don't know. Anyway, young people have so many things they want to do.
Yes.
I got 3 sons and daughters-in-law. They a lot more. They're like very active lifestyles. How about that? And farming requires a commitment of time, not only to think about it ahead of time. Again, that's what some of our ACRE programs do. That's what some of the Clemson beginning farmer programs do. It lets a person study the industry, the pros and cons on paper for a year before they put green paper, their money in it. So a lot of things we try to help people look at the industry before they dive in the pool. But I think the younger generation probably has a good perspective on, work-life balance?
Yes.
That I think agriculture and a farming life fits into that. I think it provides a great work-life balance.
How do you incorporate a work-life balance?
This job has changed what I do and changed who I am. Family's still the most important thing,
Mm-hmm,
the most important. I read one of your questions. What's the most important job or thing you've accomplished? I have 3 grown sons, all gainfully employed with beautiful wives, 3 grandchildren,
Oh, nice.
and they are the center of my universe.
Awesome.
I have a church family that's the next center of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Through this job, the amount of years I've been at it, I have great friends in this industry that I didn't have before, so
Mm-hmm.
I count on those friendships. But don't get me wrong, I still enjoy go out and walk 18
Yeah.
holes of golf. I
Yeah.
love to just get outside, and it doesn't matter if I'm playing by myself or with some good friends here in Orangeburg, to get out and do things like that. But spending time at the beach or the lake,
Nice.
whatnot, with families.
Nice.
I keep it balanced. Don't worry about that. I don't work 90 hours a week anymore.
I want you to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you're helping to lead South Carolina in expanding products that you might see as that might hold promise
Mhm.
for the growth of South Carolina.
Again, looking at the next 10, 15 years, I see that our industry, our farmers, will be a mix of very traditional, like myself. My nephew's at our farm. My sons are not, but my nephew is 5th generation, and his son would be 6th.
Awesome.
Those numbers of family farms are becoming less.
Mm-hmm.
We have people coming into the industry as a part-time farmer
Mm-hmm.
with other income, other jobs. But we have other farms coming to South Carolina that will be quite large, family-owned for the most part. And I'll give you an example. Last September, we announced the largest agribusiness investment in South Carolina's history. In Hampton County,
Yes.
not far from here,
Mm-hmm.
we'll have a greenhouse farming
Yep.
operation that will be the largest campus of greenhouse production in the United States. It'll also have a food processor. One of their strong product lines is hummus. We all like our hummus on our chips or whatever.
Pita chips.
There we go. All right, so they won't produce the product, the crops to make the hummus within their own boundaries.
Okay.
So there's a new potential for farmers to produce chickpeas.
Yes.
Now, we have to do the research
Okay.
to see, can we produce it profitably and use this as a market? And that's a conversation that I had not long ago with the leadership of 1890, thinking about the new farm down at Oler, because that's only 30 miles from there, from that location. So, looking at what the mixture of South Carolina farm families will be in 5, 10 years is critical to figure out where to put our emphasis. Small farms, farms of all sizes.
Yeah. And speaking of forecasting, where do you see the future of ag in South Carolina?
Well, I referenced it earlier. A lot in the short run will depend on post-COVID opportunities. So they will be there. We're trying to figure out how to best position farmers to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
During COVID, more research, but the consumer put the farmer, in terms of what they thought of a farmer, above doctors and nurses, because they went out and food was still there. Now, we had the interruptions, but food was still there, because historically always the nurses are right at the top, and doctors and probably pastors or whatnot, and then somewhere. So the point is, there should be opportunities now that people really want to know more and more about, well, who's growing my food, how are they doing it. We've got to figure out what that means in terms of opportunities for farmers. So that's that part. The other part, we are working hard to attract industries to South Carolina in the food space, the
Okay.
food processing space, like I talked about in Hampton County. We have others. If they come to South Carolina, then we have got to line up farmers to grow whatever it is that they need. I don't want them bringing truckloads of product from who knows where. I want them bringing it from South Carolina. So our strategies to make it successful, it's kind of all of the above.
Okay.
It is literally all of the above. We don't focus on any one size of agriculture, one demographic, to the expense of anybody else. Agriculture is a big tent, and there's a lot of room under there, and we got a lot of people under that tent. And our job, the job of 1890, and the job of Clemson Extension, and the job of Farm Bureau and others, is to collectively operate as a team.
Yes.
And welcome those people under the tent and try to show them where a door of opportunity they can walk through. Now, with a farmer, you can't push them through that door. You can't pull them through the door. All you do is hold the door open and say, come on in.
Yeah.
But again, you have to recognize what they're going through in order to decide that. So you have to be mindful of all these things, but never let it keep you from pushing forward.
Well, Commissioner Weathers, we certainly thank you for working with us in helping us to go through those doors of opportunities by partnering with the South Carolina Department of Agriculture. And certainly thank you for your leadership and taking the time to come to Orangeburg and spend a little bit of time with us and help some of our constituents understand more about leadership. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for asking. I really enjoyed it.
Well, this ends another insightful episode of Elevate Leadership Podcast. Again, it's hosted by South Carolina State University's 1890 Research and Extension Program. And again, we want to thank Commissioner Hugh Weathers for joining us and for coming to help celebrate National Ag Week with us. Just a reminder, on Friday, March 26th, we will have our virtual ribbon cutting and groundbreaking ceremony for our new farm in Oler, South Carolina. So please be sure to check out our YouTube channel to catch everything live, as well as our Facebook page. And also, you can always catch the replay on YouTube as well as any of the major streaming platforms. You're watching Elevate Leadership Podcast, and we hope you join us next month.